They say family is forever. I believed that until I lost everything and found out how little I actually mattered. For 6 years, I paid every bill, covered every crisis, and held my family together with money I barely had. The night our house burned, I raced through rain and ashes to my mother's door. I was homeless. She looked at me, laughed, and said, "This isn't a shelter." That's when the truth hit to them. I was just a paycheck, never a person. So I did the one thing no one expected. I cut every penny. By sunrise, my phone exploded with 69 missed calls. Not a single, "Are you okay?" just panic about money. That was the moment I stopped saving them and started saving myself. But before I share my story, I want to know you are here with me. Just say "listening" in the comments or let me know where you are. I love hearing how far my story reach. Sometimes even the smallest connection can make a story feel heard. Thank you. And now, here's my story. And if you believe that no one deserves to be invisible, please consider subscribing. It means more than you know. My name is Jericho Blaze. They say you can't miss what you never had, but I spent my entire life chasing something I couldn't name, a kind of warmth, a nod, a glance from the people who were supposed to know me best. For the past 6 years, I played the role of family provider. I paid the mortgage for the house in Puyallup, wired money for electric bills, and insurance covered Harper's endless car repairs, and her son's tuition kept the lights on literally and figuratively. No one ever had to ask. The system ran so smoothly it felt like I was the bank, and they were just on auto draft. My name is Jericho Blaze, but in my own home I was just a line item on someone else's spreadsheet. Tacoma's rain never really stops. My little apartment always smells faintly of salt and old coffee windows fogged from the endless drizzle. That morning started like every other. I brewed cheap coffee, checked my meticulous budget, and the faded light went through the usual ritual of logging into online banking, clicking through payment after payment. Mortgage paid, insurance paid, car repairs for Harper pending but not overdue, so I pushed it through anyway. I kept a color-coded spreadsheet that no one would ever see, and sometimes I wondered if it was the only record that I existed at all. Most days I pretended it was normal, this silence, this unspoken expectation. Harper sent a "Can you help with the phone bill? Thanks XOXO" text that vibrated my phone at 6:18 a.m. She always put the thanks before I even replied. My mother Evelyn called just after breakfast, not to check in, but to make sure the next mortgage payment hadn't slipped my mind. "Don't let it be late, Jericho," she said like a warning. "We're counting on you." She didn't ask how my consulting business was going, didn't ask about my day. I said, "I'm good, Mom. Everything's handled." I always ended our calls the same way, swallowing whatever else I wanted to say. I wasn't always so quiet. I remember being 11, hunched over a long folding table at the Puyallup Community Hall, fingers sticky with condensation from dozens of water bottles. I arranged them into the shape of a flame, my way of making the family picnic special. I looked up, hoping for approval, and watched my mother's face freeze. "Why do you always have to be so over the top, Jericho?" she said too loud. "Let your sister have the spotlight." Then she turned to Harper's potato salad, praised it like it was a masterpiece. That day I learned to stay small, to pour myself into things no one noticed. I called it love, but really I measured love in bills paid on time. I told myself as long as I was useful, I couldn't be left behind. Being useful was my safety net, my way of belonging. I picked up a faint electrical burn smell in the hallway that evening, but I brushed it off. Old wiring, I guessed. Just another thing I was supposed to fix someday. That's how it always went. I solved what I could, ignored the rest. By the time I lay down, my mind was looping through numbers and reminders. I pushed through exhaustion to renew a few more payments. One last scan through my accounts, one more confirm payment click. I told myself, just keep going. This is what family is. But just before sleep, my phone chimed with a payment error for Harper's phone bill. I decided to leave it for the morning. Outside, a distant siren rose through the rain, long and sharp, echoing through the wet streets. I didn't know it then, but everything I called normal was about to turn to ash. There's a sound that comes after fire, an emptiness, a hush over blackened wood and ruined memories. By the time I got to the house in Puyallup, the fire trucks were gone. All that was left was wet smoke, a line of yellow tape, and a charred mess that used to be a home. I stood there watching smoke rise from the place where I'd written every check, covered every cost, hoping it was enough. I realized no one had called me, not a neighbor, not my family. I asked Mrs. Flannery next door, why didn't anyone reach out? She glanced away. Your family said they'd told everyone who mattered. I flagged down a fireman, asked to see the emergency contact sheet. My name wasn't listed, not for insurance, not for emergencies, not for anything. I was invisible in the paperwork of my own life. The drive back to Tacoma was numb. The apartment building smelled like mold and rain, but the scent of burnt plastic was new. I pushed open my door, felt water seep into my shoes. Sprinklers from a fire in the next building had flooded everything I owned. The laptop barely worked. My suitcase, packed in a hurry, was stuffed with clothes that would never really dry. I checked my bank balance, wondering how much damage control I could afford. I didn't have a home to go to, so I did the only thing I could. I drove to Gig Harbor. I parked in front of my mother's house, its perfect lines lit up warm and gold against the drizzle, luxury cars parked neatly in the drive. I stood under the eaves, soaked and shivering, and rang the bell. My mother answered in silk pajamas, hair curled and immaculate. "What are you doing here?" she asked, like I'd just shown up unannounced at a stranger's door. I told her everything, the fire, the flood, how I had nowhere else. She just shrugged. "This isn't a shelter, Jericho. We have a way of doing things here." Behind her, Harper stood holding a coffee mug, eyes fixed on her phone. Neither of them invited me in. As I stepped back from the threshold, I caught a glimpse of a brand new TV flickering inside, shining bright above a gleaming fireplace. The image of the untouched luxury behind that closed door burned into me harder than any fire ever could. I got in my car and drove into the gray Seattle rain, windshield wipers fighting a losing battle. My GPS blinked uncertainly, finally leading me to a motel in Federal Way. I checked in with what was left of my credit, dropped my bag on a bed that smelled like bleach and old regrets. As I sat there letting the shock settle in, my phone buzzed. It was Wyatt texting. "We knew about the fire. Didn't want to bother you. You're tough, you always land on your feet." That's when the real pain hit. They hadn't forgotten me, they'd just decided I could fend for myself. I looked around that tiny motel room, stared at the blinking voicemail light, and the TV bolted to the wall, a cheap imitation of home, but at least it was honest. In that moment, I understood what family really meant to them. Doors opened for money, doors closed for need. Outside, the rain kept falling, washing the world clean for everyone but me. My phone kept vibrating, missed calls stacking up, each one a reminder that I was only seen when I was useful. And as the motel walls pressed in, I knew my days of being invisible for someone else's comfort were done. The air in the motel was thick with bleach, and something older, stale like regret, soaked into the carpet. I sat on the edge of the bed, my hands cold, staring at my phone and the spreadsheet open on my laptop. This was where it ended. For years, every dollar I earned poured straight into their lives: mortgage, insurance, car repairs, phone bills, tuition, groceries, fees. I never used debts I never made. My fingers hovered over each scheduled transfer. My bank's app made it all too easy, just a swipe, a confirmation, and suddenly the world changed. I paused at each prompt. Auto pay for the house in Puyallup, cancel. Utilities, cancel. Insurance on the house, cancel. Family phone plan, my name first, everyone else riding along, remove myself, then shut it all down. The last was the car lease, which Harper insisted needed my signature. I ended that too. The final confirm button felt heavier than any check I'd ever signed. For a long time, I sat in the hush that followed the only sound, the neon sign outside flickering against the window. I felt guilty. My thumb hovered over the phone as if waiting for permission to be free. Was this what being ungrateful looked like? Or was this just the truth? I forced myself to keep moving, copying every transaction from the last 6 years into a new tab, every dollar, every date, every purpose. As I worked, I realized just how invisible my life had been. My love was numbers on a screen noticed only if they stopped arriving. It didn't take long for the calls to start. First my mother, then Harper, then Wyatt, alternating between calls and texts. I let everyone go to voicemail. When I checked, my call log had grown longer and longer. 20 missed calls from my mother, 15 from Harper, 25 from Wyatt. The rest split between unknown numbers, maybe bill collectors already or old family friends drawn in by panic. My phone vibrated so much it felt alive. But the voicemails weren't about me. They were about late bills, threats of foreclosure, why the electric bill just bounced, why Harper's car wasn't paid for. The panic was never about my safety or my state of mind. It was about the sudden vacuum left when I cut the cord. Wyatt finally got through. "Look, Mom's just old-fashioned Jericho. She doesn't always mean what she says. Can't you just cover things for another month, until we get back on our feet?" There was something almost pleading in his voice, but underneath the same assumption I was the safety net, the backup generator. I told him quietly, "I can't do this anymore, Wyatt." Then I hung up. I felt both free and deeply lost. Who was I if I wasn't paying for someone else's life? Did I exist if nobody needed me? I wandered to the tiny window, rain streaking down motel sign, blinking red, white, red. My hands were still shaking when I gathered my unopened mail forwarded from my old apartment, most of it bills or junk. In the middle was a thin white envelope from the insurance company, notice of change. The date on the postmark was almost a month before the fire. I didn't open it. I just set it aside, feeling the chill of something unfinished, something they hadn't told me, or maybe didn't want me to know. The next day I took the bus to the Tacoma Public Library. The smell of old paper and quiet ambition was almost soothing. My Aunt Rosemary agreed to meet. We sat among rows of biographies and old encyclopedias. "Your mother's been telling everyone you're cold, distant, all business," she told me, her tone more sad than accusing. "She says you never cared about being part of the family, but I know what you've done for Harper, for her son." She placed her hand on mine for a moment, a rare gesture of warmth. "Maybe it's time people saw what you really gave up." I returned to the motel and started a draft email BCC'd to every relative, every friend of the family who'd ever shaken me down for a favor. I didn't send it, not yet, but I made a detailed list, date sums, mortgage statements, insurance proof, tuition bills, grocery receipts. Each item a piece of my invisible life lined up and waiting for daylight. That night, the phone rang and rang until finally I turned it off. 69 missed calls, a record I never wanted. The silence that followed was almost holy. Only one notification stayed on the lock screen, "Miles, attorney-at-law, message for you." I tapped it open. The subject read, "Possible lawsuit for emotional distress. Please call to discuss." I let the screen fade to black, the last glow of family ties flickering out with it. Lakewood was colder, somehow more impersonal than Tacoma. I rented a short-term place near the airport, the only thing I could find in my price range, the windows rattling with every low-flying jet. I spent my mornings at the small kitchen table scrolling through news feeds, barely able to look at the notifications piling up. I'd become a story, apparently a cautionary tale. On the main Tacoma community group, someone had posted a long, emotional message about a family losing their home, their one true support system, and how the son who once kept them afloat had turned his back when they needed him most. There were photos of Harper, of my mother, standing in front of the burned house, her face streaked with real or staged tears. The comments exploded with sympathy. Old neighbors, friends from church, strangers who didn't know me except for my last name, all weighing in. I saw my own photo pulled from a family picnic used as the before shot for the prodigal son who abandoned them. I tried to ignore it, but my phone kept buzzing with texts, emails, even direct messages from people I barely remembered. Harper sent a warning, "Mom's getting a lawyer. If you'd just help a little longer, this wouldn't be happening." She made it sound like a threat and a plea at the same time. There was something else gnawing at me. The insurance letter. I finally opened it, my name crossed out on the policy, replaced with Harper's, the effective date nearly a month before the fire. No call, no explanation. I went to the Pierce County Administrative Office, waited in line behind people with real emergencies. When I finally sat across from a clerk, I asked who authorized the name change. She pointed to a signature line. Harper's. She'd made the request herself. I paid for the policy, but I'd been erased before I even knew the fire happened. On the bus ride home, I scrolled through the original post again. The account that posted it wasn't Harper's, it was Cody's, her husband. He'd used photos from our family drive up to Mount Rainier spliced with shots of the burned house. He'd tagged dozens of people, turning my absence into a public spectacle. It worked. I got a message from an old friend, someone I hadn't seen since high school. Never thought you'd be that guy, Jericho. Guess money changes people. The weight of other people's stories about me was almost suffocating. That night, I checked my account history. A small transfer from Harper to my mother landed the same day my name was removed from the insurance. I recognized it for what it was, a payoff, a deal made behind my back, no room for me at the table. The more I looked, the clearer it became. My mother and Harper were partners in survival, and I was just the middleman until I wasn't needed anymore. I found myself sitting in the little park down the street, the only place quiet enough to think. The world felt hostile. Strangers looked past me. The people I loved most had made sure no one else would see me for who I was. My value was measured in monthly deposits, not memories or time or love. Now, without the money, I was less than invisible. I was the villain of their story. Back in my temporary apartment, I gathered every bit of proof, statements, emails, photos, and laid them out like cards in a losing hand. My phone buzzed again. An email from Miles. The suit has been filed. You'll be hearing from us soon. I put the insurance policy on the table, stared at the place where my name used to be, and let my hands tremble. There was no going back. The only way out was forward through the fire and the noise and the false stories until someone finally saw me as more than a checkbook and a cautionary tale. There was a night in Lakewood when I stopped being a witness to my own downfall and decided to act. My inbox was swollen with rumors, threats, pleas, and pity from every corner of my extended family. Most messages accused me of cruelty, of abandoning blood for dollars, repeating a lie that had spread like wildfire since the house burned down. I spent that evening hunched over my laptop in the dim yellow light of my rented room, every inch of the cheap wood desk covered in receipts, old bank statements, emails confirming payments, 6 years of silent giving. It wasn't just money. It was proof I had loved them the only way I knew how. I didn't sleep. I compiled a document, each dollar, each date, each mortgage installment, every tuition and repair. At the bottom, $156, $432.19. I attached photos of checks, PDFs of statements, screenshots of conversations where I promised to cover, to fix, to rescue. I didn't add a single word of bitterness, just the facts. In the to field, I entered every family member, every friend of the family, every distant cousin who had ever whispered about me behind my back. I hit BCC and sent it out into the world. It took less than an hour for the responses to begin. A call from an aunt I'd barely heard from in years. "We never knew," she whispered. "I'm sorry we judged you." The feeling that flooded me wasn't vindication, but exhaustion. My silence had made their story possible. The next morning, Harper messaged asking to meet. I found her at a little Tacoma coffee shop, rain smearing the windows, steam rising from 2 untouched mugs between us. She didn't waste time on small talk. "If you just help out a little more, Mom will drop everything. You know she doesn't handle stress well." Her voice was soft, practiced. I told her I couldn't nod anymore. The mask slipped for a second and her tone sharpened. "Why did you send that email? You made us look like beggars." I tried to explain, 6 years, over $150,000, nothing to show for it but blame. She interrupted, her voice lower, harder. "Mom always said if it wasn't for you, she'd have never gotten any peace. You're the reason she never had to face her own mess." I realized in that moment I wasn't a son to my mother, just a shield against the world. I was her armor, not her child. As if on cue, Cody sent me a legal threat by email. "Cease and desist or we'll see you in court for defamation." Attached was a voice memo from Harper herself asking me just months before to cover a few things, because the kids needed stability. I played it twice, the proof of my silent work echoing back at me. If anything, his message felt desperate. Later that day, Wyatt called. His voice was quieter than usual, the edge of desperation plain. "You know Mom's not well, Jericho. Just help until this passes. Remember when we were kids, the 3 of us on the swings in Puyallup? You always said you'd look out for us. I almost let the memory break me, but I stood my ground. That's not what this is anymore, Wyatt. I'm done." Sifting through my bank history, I noticed a small wire transfer from Harper to Wyatt on the exact date my name vanished from the insurance policy. It didn't take much to see what that was for his silence, his cooperation. I saw the network of favors and debts stretching out a web that had once held me in place, now twisting against itself. As the day faded, a notification popped up. The viral post that smeared me across the Tacoma community group was suddenly gone. No apology, no explanation. I'd sent my records to the admin quietly, privately. Maybe someone had decided evidence mattered, or maybe they just wanted to avoid a fight. Either way, my story was no longer just theirs to tell. When I finally left the coffee shop, rain still falling, the air felt lighter. I wasn't healed, not yet, but the weight of invisibility had begun to lift. I walked home with my head up, understanding for the first time in years what it felt like to exist outside someone else's narrative. But as I opened my email that night, a new subject line waited: official notice, lawsuit filed. The storm wasn't over. If anything, it was about to hit full force. The world outside the motel was gray, and unyielding rain battering the glass neon from the parking lot, slicing through the gloom. I had barely slept. My mother called, and for once I answered. She was furious, her voice a cold blade. "You humiliated me in front of everyone I know. The club, our friends, everyone's talking." Her anger was raw, nothing veiled. "All these years you made me look good. Now you want to take that away?" I let her talk, then finally interrupted. "I funded your life, Mom. I kept the lights on. But I'm not here to be a character in your story anymore. I'm done." Her reply was a mix of pleading and rage. She needed me to keep the mask in place. For the first time, I didn't flinch. I told her the truth. I was never your son. I was your insurance policy. I hung up and started sorting through old mail bills, legal documents, the remains of my financial life. At the bottom of the stack, I found another envelope from the insurance company, forwarded from my flooded Tacoma apartment to the motel. I slid it open with shaking hands. Inside, a formal rejection of my claim bearing my name in block letters, but the signature on the form was a shaky copy of my own, forged and obvious. Someone, Harper or my mother, had signed it for me. This was their final move, erasing my right to the home I'd paid for. The phone buzzed again. Harper, this time a long text about how she'd had to do what was necessary for everyone's safety. She insisted it was for protection, not greed. I didn't reply. Wyatt showed up late, face drawn, eyes tired. He tried at first to justify everything, how hard things had been. How maybe Mom pushed too hard, how Harper never meant for you to be left out. But I pushed him quietly, but relentlessly. "You took money to keep quiet, Wyatt. She bought your silence. You all knew exactly what you were doing." There was no rage left in me, just clarity. He admitted it. Voice barely audible. Harper said if you lost the insurance, she'd finally be free. She wanted it all to herself. The weight of all those years crashed over me. I drove to the Lacey Cemetery and stood at my grandmother Clara's grave, the rain finally washing away the last of my defenses. I read aloud a letter I'd written and rewritten 100 times, then struck a match and burned it on the wet concrete, watching the flames sputter, rise and vanish, a life's worth of unsent words going up in smoke. For the first time in years, I didn't feel guilt. I felt release. Back at the motel, the air smelled of ozone and hope. The phone rang one last time. Miles, my lawyer. He spoke with a certainty I hadn't felt in months. "You owe them nothing, Jericho. They have no claim. This will all be over soon." My chest ached with relief and something new, a flicker of pride. I packed my few belongings, grabbed the last insurance envelope, and stepped outside. The rain had softened to a drizzle. As I drove to the cemetery again before leaving town, I placed a small stone on Clara's grave, a promise to myself that I would never be invisible again. I stepped into the rain, let it soak me, and felt the burden slip away. The world was still gray, still uncertain, but for the first time in my life, I was free to build something just for me. West Seattle's air always carried a certain saltiness in the evenings, the kind that made me feel both alive and at peace. I moved into my new apartment just as the days began to stretch into summer, golden light flooding the tiny living room and bouncing off the bay. For the first time in years, the space around me wasn't filled by anyone else's noise or demand. The silence was my own, and I savored it. Each morning I sat with coffee on the balcony, looking out over Elliott Bay and letting the world feel big again. I started to understand that being alone didn't have to mean being lonely, but the old world was slow to let go. My phone still buzzed with notifications. Harper in panic now after the court dismissed the family's lawsuit. Her messages were always urgent, always about what I could do to fix things. The mortgage is overdue again. Mom is so upset. We need you. But the need felt hollow, and I left each message unread. Evelyn surprised me one night by showing up at the Tacoma Diner where I sometimes ate dinner. I just paid for my own meal, a small act that felt radical. She slid into the booth across from me, her perfume a mixture of nostalgia and regret. She asked for one last chance, her voice trembling between command and plea. "I've made mistakes, Jericho. We all have. You were always the one who made everything better. Can't you just try again for me?" I looked at her, the woman who'd shaped so much of my story for better and worse. "I'm not a walking bank account anymore, Mom. And I'm not that 11-year-old who needed a pat on the head. I'm done." She didn't cry, didn't get angry. She just seemed small, and for the first time I didn't rush to fill that emptiness for her. I let her leave. Later that week, Harper sent a voice memo, a recording from years ago. Mom's voice, sharp as ever. "Jericho's the engine of this family. If we lose him, who keeps us going?" I listened and then deleted it. It wasn't meant to comfort me, only to keep me in my place. I realized I didn't need that version of myself anymore. That weekend, an email from Miles, my lawyer, confirmed everything the court ruled in my favor. There were no obligations left, no debts, no way for my family to reach into my pockets again. The relief wasn't explosive, but steady, like a knot untangling after too long. I felt myself breathing differently. The universe sometimes sends signals when you need them most. I'd just finished lunch at the same diner when the waitress returned, smiling. "That man by the window paid for your meal," she said, handing me a slip of paper. On it, in careful handwriting, "You're never invisible." I looked up, but the man had already left. Still, the note burned in my pocket all day, a small, unexpected proof that I was seen by someone somewhere. That afternoon, I started my new job as a mentor at the Olympia Community Center. The room was full of teenagers, some angry, some hopeful, most just searching. I told them my story, not the numbers or the drama, but the real truth, that losing everything forced me to find out what was left, and what was left was enough. I watched the way their eyes met mine. I wanted them to know what I hadn't known: you can begin again, even after you've been burned down to the foundation. On my first night back in my new apartment, I cooked dinner just for myself, folded a napkin into the shape of a flame, and set it on my table. I didn't take a picture or send it to anyone. I just let it be what it was, a reminder that my fire was still burning even if no one else was watching. As the sun dipped low, I stepped onto my balcony, letting the city lights shimmer across the water. The world felt open. I whispered to the wind, "I'm not afraid to be seen anymore." And for the first time in a long time, I believed it. Some journeys end quietly. Mine did not. It ended with a new beginning, one that wasn't about money or forgiveness or making up for someone else's story, but about building my own. At the Olympia Community Center, I found a place where the pain I'd carried for years became fuel for something better. I worked with young people who had learned too soon what it felt like to be ignored, to be defined by their usefulness or their problems. I showed them what I'd learned the hard way, that being seen doesn't start with someone else. It starts with you. There was one afternoon, a Thursday, gray and hopeful, when a teenage boy stayed behind after our budgeting session. He was quiet, withdrawn. He looked at the napkin I'd absent-mindedly folded into a flame and asked, "Why do you do that?" I told him honestly that it reminded me I could always start again. He nodded, his eyes filling with tears. I thought I was the only one who felt invisible. I put my hand on his shoulder and said, "You're not. And you never will be." Later, back at my apartment, I found a string of emails from old friends, people who'd once believed the worst about me. "We were wrong," one wrote. "I'm sorry. I see now what you carried." The weight I'd borne for so long felt lighter with every message. Even Harper reached out, no words, just a photo attachment. It was from that old community center party, me at 11 beaming beside my lopsided bottle flame. I stared at it for a long time. There was pain, yes, but also pride. I didn't reply, but I smiled. The past wasn't something to erase. It was a root holding me steady as I grew. At the end of each week, I'd tidy my little kitchen folding napkins into flames and setting them by the window, a ritual no one needed to witness but me. I visited Clara's grave in Lacey, leaving behind a single napkin, orange and red, on the grass. "Thank you," I whispered. I made it. The last time I returned to the Tacoma diner, I saw the same waitress and the same corner booth. I left an extra tip with a note, "No one's invisible here." I smiled at strangers, greeted the people I passed. For the first time, the world felt like it was waiting for me, not the other way around. Now when I think of love, I don't count it in dollars or debts paid. I see it in every small act of self-respect, in every flame I fold, in every young person I remind that they matter. I built a life not from obligation, but from freedom. I'm not hiding. I'm not waiting. I am here unashamed and unafraid. I used to think if I paid every bill, I'd finally belong. But love doesn't have a price, and dignity doesn't require permission. Now I love myself, and I am no longer invisible. Betrayal from the people who should protect you is a particular kind of heartbreak, cruel, practical, and oddly efficient. Jericho's story is a sharp, honest mirror. For years he measured love in transactions, believing that if he kept paying, he would be allowed to stay. Instead, he became invisible inside his own life, a silent ledger entry until the day the house burned and the receipts mattered more than the person who signed them. Reading this, it's impossible not to feel anger for the small, deliberate cruelties, the curt texts, the absent calls, the careful erasures from policies and papers. But what lingers after the anger is a deeper, quieter recognition that being taken for granted can hollow you out more effectively than any single act of malice. What moved me most wasn't the spectacle or the lawsuit, but the motel nights where Jericho counted every cent, documented every transfer, and cataloged a life of giving that went largely unseen. In those moments, he wasn't performing for pity or vengeance. He was assembling proof of his existence, of the labor that had vouched for others while leaving him unmoored. There's something courageous in that, not a dramatic reveal for likes, but the sober, meticulous work of saying, "This is what I gave," and then choosing himself. He didn't simply lash out, he organized, he faced the mess, and he reclaimed his narrative with evidence instead of theatrics. This story is also a study in how communities respond when the mask slips. Gossip and social media can flatten complicated lives into single-line judgments, but facts have a way of complicating the comfortable lie. When Jericho's records met the rumor mill, the tide shifted. People who had once accepted the polished version of events began to remember the man who quietly solved problems, the neighbor who once showed up with tools, the friend who paid tuition without fanfare. That reversal is important. It reminds us that truth is slow and often messy, but in the end it matters more than a curated narrative. If there's a lesson here, it is that freedom usually costs fear before it brings relief. Walking away from roles assigned by others is not glamorous. It's bureaucratic and lonely and full of small practical headaches, canceled autopays, awkward confrontations, legal threats. But uncertainty is better than the slow erasure of your life. Jericho's rebuilding, mentoring teens, folding napkins into flames, finding work that honors his effort is quieter than a triumphal montage and far more durable. It's the work of tending what remains after the fire and letting purpose grow from the ashes. So ask yourself, how much of you have you turned into a service for other people's comfort? Who in your circle assumes your presence is automatic? Jericho's story is not only his, it's an invitation to anyone who has ever been used, overlooked, or rewritten. Keep the records, tell the truth plainly, and find the small community that sees you not as a convenient resource, but as a person. There is power in documentation and power in witness, and together those things make erasure harder. If this resonated with you, please subscribe. Your subscription is more than a number. It helps build a space where stories like Jericho's are honored, where invisible people are given voice, and where small acts of courage are witnessed. Drop a comment with listening. Tell us where you're from, or share a moment when you had to choose yourself. Join us in making a place where dignity matters more than convenience, and where attention is the first step toward repair. By subscribing, you join a quiet rebellion. People who choose truth over spectacle and care over convenience. Stand with us when the smoke clears. Hit subscribe, share this if it moved you. And remember that your attention is the most powerful currency we can spend together.